Hi. So we're going to read this book together. We're riding on a caravan, an adventure on the Silk Road. We're riding on a caravan, a bumpy, bumpy caravan. We're riding on a caravan to places far away. A year ago, we left Xi'an. The summer sun was bright. We tugged our camels to their feet and tied the cargo tight. We passed beneath the city gate and heard the tower bell. Before we took the Silk Road west, we stopped to wave farewell. We're riding on a caravan, a bumpy, bumpy caravan, riding on a caravan to places far away. 9 months ago, we reached Lanzhou as leaves began to fall. We crossed the Yellow River and drew near the city wall. We traded silk for bags of wool. We liked its pleasant smell. We bought fresh fruit and vegetables to eat and take to sell. "6 months ago we reached Dunhuang. A brisk wind chilled the air. Around the lush oasis there were sand dunes everywhere. We sold some silk and precious stones. We traded rice for bread. We filled our jugs with water for the desert road ahead. 5 months ago we reached Hami, worn out and sick and cold, for winter in the desert was as harsh as we'd been told. We warmed ourselves with goat head soup and steaming cups of tea, and rested there for several days before we left Hami. 3 months ago we reached Turpan and felt the touch of spring. We passed fresh fields and vineyards that were just awakening. We stopped to trade at mud brick huts where grapes were hung to dry, to turn into the raisins that the caravans would buy. A week ago we reached Kashgar. Our journey's end was near, for it was summer once again, and we'd been gone a year. Our bodies were exhausted, and the camels' feet were sore. The trip along the Silk Road was 2,000 miles or more. Hooray! Today is market day, the reason that we came, for Kashgar's Sunday market is of legendary fame. The people at this great bazaar, each from a different land, are speaking many languages that we don't understand. But everyone has gathered here to buy or sell or trade, replenishing their caravans with purchases they've made. We'll sell the silk that we have brought till every bolt is gone, then buy exotic merchandise to take back to Xi'an. There's ivory from India, and curry spices, and teas, and carpets from the Middle East, and woven tapestries, and horses from Arabia, and flocks of goats and sheep, and hairy yaks from mountain towns where snow and ice pile deep. Too soon the sun is setting, and the market shutters down. The caravans are piled high, preparing to leave town. For some will make the journey through the mountains to the west, and some will take the southern route because they know it best. But we will travel to the east. We've done it all before. We'll travel on the Silk Road till we reach Xi'an once more. And here's a cool map. So this is the Eastern Silk Road, the China part. I'm going to read this part. This is just text. Here's the text with the princess in the corner. It all began with a young Chinese empress, a little warm and a big secret. In ancient times, so the story goes, the Chinese emperor's new bride, Si Lingxi, was sitting in her garden beneath a mulberry tree. A cocoon fell from above into her cup of hot tea, and as she drew it from the water, it unraveled into a long, delicate thread of silk. From this accident, the Chinese discovered how to form thread from the cocoons of silkworm moths. Hundreds of tiny worms, actually caterpillars, hatched from the moths' eggs. For 6 weeks they feasted night and day in mulberry leaves until they were large enough to spin cocoons. The cocoons were gathered by workers who softened them with steam or hot air. Unwinding several cocoons at a time, they carefully twisted the hair-like strands into silk thread. Then the thread was woven into cloth and dyed in a rich palette of colors. The finished fabric was strong and airy and beautiful. It made brilliant flags and banners for the Chinese armies. People from far away were fascinated by the silk and wanted to make it for themselves. The Chinese were much too clever to share their secret, however. The preparation of silk was carefully guarded, and for a long time no one else knew how it was made. Today, many countries besides China produce silk, and machines have taken over much of the work. But the story truly began a long time ago with a young empress, a little worm, and a big secret. All right, so I'll try to read this really quickly, but this might be relevant too. The caravan path known as the Silk Road is thousands of years old. Historians think the long, long path was the first trade route between the peoples of Europe and the Orient. Europeans loved Chinese silk and were eager to buy it, so caravans laden with fabric traveled west through mountain kingdoms and desert villages to deliver it. But silk was not their only cargo. The Chinese also carried furs, spices, metals, jade, ceramics, and lacquerware. On their way, they stopped at oases and trading posts to sell their goods, barter for new things, and buy water and supplies. At the same time, caravans traveling east from Europe brought gems, gold, silver, ivory, tapestries, and perfume to the Orient. Very few caravans made the entire trip along the Silk Road. It was much too long. Usually, caravans would stop at a place where people could rest. New drivers and fresh animals would continue the journey. Often the people returned home, but sometimes they stayed to raise their families in the new village. This way, different groups of people came to live along the Silk Road. They brought with them new religions and art, new languages and inventions, and best of all, new ideas. China's Silk Road is only part of the ancient caravan path. One route continued west from Kashgar through the mountains to Samarkand in Central Asia. Another followed a southern route through mountain passes into India. The Silk Road even reached all the way to Europe. Today, many of the Chinese oases mentioned in this story are bustling cities, just as they must have been centuries ago. One of the most famous explorers who passed along the Silk Road was Marco Polo. Almost 800 years ago, he traveled between Italy and China, a journey that took several years. We are lucky to have his stories to tell us about the people he met and the things he saw as he made his way along the Silk Road.